Next, we've got a couple of sessions looking at radio's commercial effectiveness for advertisers. First up, we're going to hear from Radiocentre's Insight team about some new research that uncovers evidence of radio's multiplier effect for performance marketing campaigns. Here to tell us more are Radiocentre's Planning Director, Mark Barber, and Head of Insight, Donna Burns.
This is Donna, and I'm Mark, and today we're going to be taking you through a whistle-stop tour of Radiocentre's latest research project, Radio, the Performance Multiplier, which, as the subtitle suggests, explores how radio advertising can help brands punch through the performance plateau. Now, I suspect some of you are thinking, maybe not quite like this, but what is this performance plateau of which you speak? And that, I have to say, is a very fair question. So here's a quick description to help set the scene. So in our launch webinar, Tom Roach, who heads up brand strategy at digital agency Jellyfish, highlighted how it's become common for many brands who've got very much a clear performance mindset to hit a point where their success of their traditional mix of search and social and online display begins to level off. And when brands hit this performance plateau, as Tom calls it, business growth starts to stall and customer acquisition costs increase dramatically. And this situation occurs because while search and social can be very efficient at generating response, it's not uncommon for performance marketers to max out these channels and overfish the pond. And if there are no new customers entering the market, it's natural that growth will eventually grind to a halt. And so to get beyond the plateau and support ongoing business growth, Tom suggests that brands need to strike a better balance between generating and converting demand. And this really requires layering in brand advertising, offline media, to reach a wider audience of potential customers. And at the same time, this demand generation activity can also produce an immediate uplift in the short-term effectiveness of pure play performance activity, as suggested in this diagram.
And the good news for radio within this context is there's plenty of evidence to suggest its valuable role in balancing both generating and converting demand for brands. Now, we haven't got time to go through all of that today, but it's all referenced within the research report for this particular project, which can be found on the Radiocentre website. So if that is the case, there is lots of evidence around why do advertisers really struggle to isolate radio's effect in uplifting web traffic for brands? Well, we believe there are two key challenges getting in the way. Now, the first is one that actually all offline media face, and that is bridging the gap between offline exposure and web effects to really demonstrate effects, especially in compared to the kind of breadcrumb trail, hopefully depicted by the picture on the screen, of tracking cookies that fuel last click attribution. Now, a method that has evolved over recent years for measuring TV's effect on performance marketing consists of analysing uplifts in web traffic within a short-term window, typically around 20 minutes following a TV spot's transmission. However, if you analyse radio in this way, you can see that actually radio underperforms versus other channels, which leads us neatly onto the second and unique challenge that radio faces. And that is, according to IPA touchpoints, 9 in 10 radio listening occasions happen whilst people are doing other things, whether they be driving, cooking, working. And this is really crucial to acknowledge because it means that listeners aren't always available to respond immediately, certainly in comparison to other media channels that require more primary attention, like social media and TV. So our hypothesis is this, which builds upon previous research studies, is actually the multitasking nature of radio merely delays rather than limits online response. However, because of this, a spot-by-spot short-term response window attribution just doesn't work for radio. It fails to capture accurately the full effect of radio advertising. And due to this delay in responding, when listeners do respond, they're less likely to remember the specific web address, so therefore more likely to respond indirectly. which means that the full effect of radio advertising can only be realised by reviewing a full range of referral sources, whether that be organic search or other kind of paid performance channels like PPC and paid social. So in summary, these factors help to explain why current attribution approaches just don't work for radio. They fail to accurately quantify radio's effect on driving response for performance campaigns. They also explain why this particular project needed some real different thinking. So, acknowledging this context and everything that people told us about how challenging it was to really demonstrate radio's impact for performance campaigns, we set ourselves these objectives for this particular project. Now, you lot look like a pretty literate bunch, so I won't waste time reading them out to you. However, the process that we had to undertake to achieve these objectives was less straightforward. And because it's crucial to understand how we got to the findings, we are going to take a little bit of time explaining the approach that we took. Sorry about that. Mark.
Thank you. So the big question we had to address with our selected approach was, how is it possible to accurately capture an offline medium's online response when it's likely to be delayed or realised over a yet-to-be-determined period of time and delivered through a range of response channels? So, working with Jason Brownlee of independent research agency Colortext. Jason's in the audience today. Hello, Jason. We quickly established that regression modelling was the best, or perhaps the only, means of addressing this conundrum. And within this context, we realised that to underpin the credibility of the findings, it was essential that the analysis was based on real-world data for in-market campaigns. So Colortext proposed a self-tuning multiple regression model to help us identify the correlation between multimedia impacts, our independent variable, and web sessions, the dependent variable, for the participating campaigns. And the two sets of data required for running this level of analysis are by necessity extremely detailed. So the first data set consists of Google Analytics data, namely the total volume of daily web sessions for the brand broken down by referral source. Our second data set relates to media weight and spend. Here, the information we required from participating campaigns consisted of all adult impressions by medium, by day, together with total spend by medium, by week. And the information contained in these two data sets covered the full radio campaign period and a minimum of 2 weeks either side, pre and post. And from this data, the self-tuning model establishes the extent to which daily media impressions in each medium exert influence over the variance in daily web sessions. So building on this initial analysis, the model is then equipped to establish a baseline level of daily web sessions across the radio campaign period, assuming that no demand generation media activity has taken place. So here's an example of what the baseline looked like for one of the brands in the study. Then, by comparing actual data from Google Analytics with its baseline, we can establish the total media-driven uplift in web sessions during the radio campaign period, shown here. And finally, based on the level of influence of each medium that's already been determined by the model, we can ascertain the proportion of this total uplift that is attributable to each medium, as demonstrated in this chart.
Okay, so in addition to this daily multimedia information, specifically for the radio within the campaign, we also requested 7 days worth of minute-by-minute data for both data sets, representing a typical week within the radio campaign. Now, based on this more granular data, Jason from Colortext developed a model using a self-tuning ad stock function to analyse the relationship between the radio impacts and the web sessions on a minute-by-minute basis. Now, this was really key because it helped us to test our hypothesis around radio's delayed response effect and really quantify the time lag between a radio spot going to air and when it delivered its full response potential. So that's the approach that we took. We spoke to over 20 different agencies to try and attain data to this level in as many in-market campaigns as possible. Now, we want to acknowledge the huge commitment in both time and effort to provide this level of detail for campaigns. So we want to say a huge thank you to the 4 brands that got on board and their agencies for helping with this project, because without their data, we couldn't provide the analysis and the groundbreaking findings as a result. So thank you to the HomeServe client through December 19, Checkatrade and Harry's via Good Stuff, and National Express, who came via M6. Now, this was a self-selecting sample, but it does consist of a range of interesting businesses feeding our analysis with 4 very different campaigns. But each campaign placed a significant investment in demand generation media.
So as you can see from this chart, their total aggregated media spend during the analysed time frame was £3.25 million, with TV and BVOD and radio and digital audio accounting for the vast majority of spend. Now, it's important to note here that pay-per-click spend and impacts haven't been included in this analysis because it almost exclusively relates to converting demand generated by other media rather than generating demand in its own right. And that's fairly common practice for analyses of this nature. And finally, to attain optimal statistical significance, we combined radio and digital audio impacts in the model. Similarly, TV and BVOD. For simplicity, we refer to the total audio effects as radio. And this feels appropriate given that radio represents 85% of the total audio spend and is clearly the main driver of reach into audio. Now, some of you may be questioning the robustness of our analysis because it's based on just 4 campaigns. However, it's really important to acknowledge here that what this sample perhaps lacks in breadth, it more than makes up for in depth of data. Across these 4 campaigns, our daily multimedia model encompasses the effect of 1.6 billion media impressions on 30 million web sessions. And similarly, our minute-by-minute radio time-lagged model incorporates over 40,000 individual time-based data points, exploring the relationship between 152 million radio advertising impacts and 2.1 million web sessions. So resulting from this depth of data, the individual regression models demonstrated highly significant results from a statistical perspective. So it's fair to say that based on this big data, combined with the passive nature of the data sets that were analysed, we present the findings to you confident in the knowledge that they're neutral, fair, and representative of how demand generation media in general, and radio advertising in particular, exert powerful effects within the performance marketing mix.
Thank you, Mark. So that's what we did. What did we find out? Well, first of all, I'm going to start with probably the most crucial finding from this project, demonstrating why typical attribution approaches completely misrepresent radio's effect within performance campaigns. Now, my favourite of all the findings, this here, it is my favourite graph. I'm not even ashamed to admit it. Please don't judge me. It's derived from the analysis of that minute-by-minute data. Feel free to take a picture. It's a great graph. The minute-by-minute data of the web sessions, and they are as well, the web sessions and radio impact data. Now, the chart shows the cumulative build of effect of an average radio spot delivered by hour following its transmission, expressed as a proportion of its total potential effect. Now, this clearly supports the hypothesis that radio advertising takes time to deliver its full response potential, 19 hours in fact. So why is this so important? Well, the implication of this finding is stark. As the chart demonstrates, less than a quarter of radio's total potential effect is delivered within that first hour following the spot's transmission. And resulting from this, we could dig a little deeper and actually find that only 8% is delivered within that 20-minute window that radio is often measured against. So this means that a whopping 92% of radio's total potential effect on web traffic is completely excluded if you look at short-term window attribution approaches. So no wonder performance marketers are struggling to justify radio's inclusion within their media mix. Evaluating radio in this way is like asking for it to fight for its place on the plan with its arms and its legs tied behind its back. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking, why should I care? It's only radio after all. But herein lies the crucial thing. How effective is radio when its full response is accurately captured? So this leads us on to the final the next finding, which looks at overall how on-demand media are effective in driving web response within performance campaigns.
And the good news here is that advertising in broad-based, brand-building, predominantly offline media really works. Hey, we do make a difference, folks. That's great. According to the regression analysis, demand generation media combined drove an average uplift of 25% in daily web sessions. Now, aggregated across the 4 campaigns, that represents a total of around 1.5 million additional web sessions generated through demand generation media. And so, in essence, extending their media mix to incorporate offline brand-building media helps online businesses exert more control over their fortunes, or as I like to paraphrase it, means that they move beyond fighting over the scraps on the table and really start bringing home the bacon for themselves. So, having established that, now let's move on to the crucial question: how does radio perform within this context?
Well, according to the same regression analysis of that daily data, when its effect is accurately captured this time, on average, radio drove an uplift of 9% in daily web sessions across our 4 campaigns. And this means that radio accounts for over a third of the total uplift delivered by on-demand media. Now, to put this into further context, you may recall Mark's pie chart, which showed that radio, including digital audio, made up 29% of the total media spend across our campaigns. So when you can compare the proportion of total effect versus the proportion of spend on media, you get a sense of the potential cost efficiencies that radio advertising can add to performance marketing campaigns. But to fully understand this relative cost efficiency and the drivers behind it, we really need to understand and look in a little bit more detail at the campaigns individually.
So to do this, we compared how cost-efficient radio was in generating additional web sessions relative to all other media combined within each campaign, and then used this data to calculate the average radio performance, again relative to other media, across all the campaigns in the study. So as the chart shows, this analysis revealed how, on average, across our 4 campaigns, radio generated additional web sessions twice as cost-efficiently as other media combined. However, as with all advertising effectiveness studies of this sort of nature, especially when you've got a self-selecting sample of in-market campaigns, there was a degree of variation in performance. And as this chart shows, radio boosted web sessions more cost-efficiently than other media in 3 out of the 4 cases. Impressively, the best-performing campaign demonstrated cost efficiency almost 3 times greater than other media, around 50% higher than the average, and 10 times better than the worst performer. So if you're wondering what makes a difference, how can we get towards the top end of the scale, further analysis identified the controllable factors most associated with the best-performing campaigns. Back to Donna to tell you what it revealed.
Okay, so yes, so this table shows the differences in average weekly reach and the use of audio brand assets for the top 2 above average efficiency campaigns versus the bottom 2. So the findings are conclusive. First of all, campaigns that achieved higher weekly reach delivered better effects. And secondly, those best performing campaigns also were the campaigns that placed a really strong emphasis on distinctive and consistent audio brand assets. So these findings were not a surprise to me and Mark. We have a lot of previous research studies, including the ROI multiplier and the big audio data mine, that also support these findings around the importance of weekly reach and creative consistency. Now, having explored how to optimise radio performance through media planning and creative development, we now move on to consider how adapting the use of radio within the media mix can enhance overall campaign performance. Now, a basic premise of radio being so cost efficient relative to other demand generation media is that if you redeploy media spend to radio, this of course should then lead to improvements in overall campaign cost efficiency. But as I explained before, people are doing other things when listening to radio. So as a result of radio's delayed response, people are likely to respond indirectly, meaning that the full effects of radio can only be understood by measuring the changes in response across a whole range of the referral sources I mentioned before, like organic search and paid social. So in this study, 3 out of our 4 campaigns experienced a disproportionate uplift in web sessions referred via these different pure play online response channels as shown on this slide. Now, this allowed us to explore the interaction effects between radio advertising and these typical performance marketing media.
So the three charts on this slide reveal what the models developed for each of the campaigns, tell us about how referrals from organic search, paid search, and paid social change as radio's share of the total media budget increases, funded by reducing spend in other demand generation media, so basically at no additional cost to the advertiser. For simplicity of presentation, the data's been indexed, so we compare the volume of referrals triggered by increased radio budget share, indicated by the light green arrow on the right of each chart, to the volume of referrals recorded at radio's actual share of the media budget within the relevant in-market campaign, and that's indicated by the dark green arrow on the left of each chart. And as you can see, they reveal strong positive correlation between radio budget share and referrals generated through each of organic search, and paid social. And the learning from these individual case studies is clear, it's consistent, and it's highly compelling. For each of these pure play performance referral sources, the data suggests that reallocating budgets from other media into radio will still reap dividends at a radio budget share of 50% and beyond.
Okay, so these results clearly indicate the effects radio advertising exerts on overall performance efficiencies, and further analysis demonstrates how beyond enhancing short-term web responses, as we saw, radio additionally generates longer-term brand effects for advertisers. So for the two live campaigns included within this study, Brands A and Brand C, we were able to conduct post-campaign consumer surveys to really understand radio's concurrent effects on longer-term brand health, in addition to driving those short-term uplifts in web response.
So these surveys help explain how radio advertising delivers a short-term uplift in web sessions by driving awareness and purchase consideration for the advertised brands. As seen here, among those exposed to the radio advertising, our test sample compared to the matched non-radio exposed control sample. And beyond this short-term boost to performance metrics supported by the increase in awareness and consideration, the results of these surveys also demonstrate how radio advertising concurrently builds mental availability for the advertised brands, evidenced here in terms of mental penetration and average network size. And importantly, these brand effects are delivered over and above radio's uplift effect on web sessions, again, at no additional cost to the radio advertiser.
So to finish, here is a quick summary to help remind you of the key takeouts of how radio advertising helps brands to punch through that performance plateau. Now, firstly, and probably most importantly, demonstrated by my favourite graph, is how current attribution analysis excludes a whopping 92% of radio's potential effect on online response. So to really understand and get a proper handle on how your radio is working, those short-term windows, it's just not a good approach to go down. But this study does categorically show that when you do capture radio's full effect accurately, it can be a highly valuable part of a performance marketing mix, on average boosting daily web sessions by 9% and twice as cost efficiently as other demand generation media. So as a result of this efficiency, increasing radio's share, as Mark said, of the media budget can enhance overall campaign performance at no extra cost. And beyond those short-term benefits, radio can currently boost mental availability of performance brands, which can really play an important role in generating future demand and delivering ongoing and sustainable growth for businesses.
And one final thought from me. Over the last 8, 9, 10 months, I know it's felt like a bloody long time, I'll tell you that, working on this analysis, I've seen for myself how easy it is to take referrals at face value and assume linear relationships between media activity and response that simply don't exist or are dangerously misleading. Jason will back me up on this. And to that end, I'm advocating last collects it and recommending that UK marketers take back control of their marketing metrics from Silicon Valley by introducing regression modelling into their performance monitoring toolbox. So cheap joke aside, I've got loads of those anyway. To show you how serious we are about this, Radiocentre is ring-fencing budget to fund the same regression analysis used in this study for up to 8 other advertisers' qualifying campaigns across the rest of this year. Now, if you're interested, please drop us a line or come and have a chat during the break. And that, you'll be relieved to know, I think both of us are as well, brings us to the end of this presentation. But if you've been left wanting more, or perhaps you're a glutton for punishment, you can download the full detailed research report from the Radiocentre website. Thank you very much for your attention and listening.